Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and I'm joined today by Stephanie Shojaee, and she is the president of Shoma Group, an award-winning real estate development company that specializes in residential and commercial projects. With more than a decade of experience, Stephanie oversees all marketing, branding, sales, operations, and communication strategies. And also, it's not for a small function here. This is like over $5 billion in completed real estate transactions and assets. So we're really happy to have you here today, Stephanie. So welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. So first, as I mentioned to you, of course, off camera before we began, we are happy to also have you here during Hispanic Heritage Month. And so that's a double honor for us to feature you today. So listen, you are slaying the game clearly in the real estate development world. And it's really a highly competitive industry, of course, very male driven, male dominated, so to speak. You're known for your keen eye, talent, creativity that's really helped Shoma Group become the big force it is today. But I do want to ask you about your humble beginnings, if you will. So you're the daughter of Colombian immigrants, correct?
Yes, I am. My parents actually came here back in the 80s with nothing. My dad came here, landed on an airplane with absolutely no documents, basically landed and ran. My mom came a couple months later, and they had nothing. They had to start from scratch, attempt to learn the language, make ends meet. At one point, I believe my parents lived in something that was like the size of a closet. It was very small. Fast forward, then they had me. I was born in the United States, but I was raised extremely Colombian. As a matter of fact, I learned English when I was around 10 years old. So I consider myself 100% Colombian. Identify so much with the Hispanic culture.
Yeah.
And I learned everything from my parents.
So you have the dichotomy, though, of being like an American girl,
Yeah.
because you're sort of being raised in that culture, but then also having been really closely tied to your Colombian roots. And I have to say, it's really interesting. I'm going to turn around right now because I have this book that was written by, and I just interviewed her 2 weeks ago, Daniela Pierre Bravo. Do you know her from MSNBC? And she's on Morning Joe, and she from Hispanic heritage.
Maybe if I see her face.
Well, I bring it up because literally verbatim, a very similar story. She had to sort of exist with the undocumented status and the parents. And so she had to rise above all that. And I really feel that because of that and because of your adversity, and I'll just see if it relates to what she says, do you think that drove you to be hyper successful, even more so because you almost out of necessity had to do that?
Absolutely, 100%. When you grow in a household where you're seeing your parents work extra hard, where you know that you have to be better than the person next to you, you have to be more prepared, you have to just really race harder and stronger. It teaches you that since a very young age. I still remember my parents taking the test to become residents of the United States. And I was very, very young, having to teach my parents English because the test obviously was in English, and like having to see that struggle. It made me at a very young age want to be, a step ahead.
Right. Yeah. She mentions that exact same thing. In fact, her book is called The Other, and it's about women of color, how they have to sort of exist in these worlds where they are in some ways made to feel invisible because of stigma and stereotype. And then what happens is, if you can hone who you are and live in your authenticity, you empower yourself and you show up as your full Latina Colombian woman self and own the situation. So I know your heritage is a big part of why you say also you've been successful. So explain more about that.
So it's one of the things that I actually pride myself in, especially now in the role that I have, is to have an all-woman Latina team working here at Shoma, especially predominantly in the marketing department. And one of the things I like to teach them is to make sure that they're always authentic to who they are. Because if you walk into a meeting and you are really who you are not worrying about pretending to be someone else, knowing the subject and following everything that's being discussed in the meeting. So for me, it's super important that you own exactly who you are. You dress how you identify, how you feel. So for me, that's one of the main things I try to teach girls. But I think the Hispanic heritage, for sure, I think is one of my superpowers. I think that it's made me such a hard worker, having to, like you said, I have to identify with who I am and like work harder so that I don't get shadowed in the back, which I did get always put back in the back. Even in kindergarten, there's so many things that you think a teacher doesn't realize that a little kid will always take with them. I remember them saying to take out a red crayon. And I was very young, but I didn't know what red was or what color. I knew crayon, but I was like picking up all the colors. And the teacher kind of just like didn't make me the line leader because obviously I wasn't going to lead. So she put me all the way in the back versus like maybe teaching me this was the red and like helping me. At a very young age, I knew like I was going to be placed in the back. I was the Hispanic girl. My parents probably didn't understand what the teacher was saying. Nowadays, I feel like the world slowly adjusted to being a little bit more understanding, to wanting to learn about other cultures. It's a little bit more open. It wasn't like that when I was younger. You don't speak English too bad. At that time, I don't know if you remember, they had that little calculator. It was a calculator and you type in, you had to like type in Spanish. It was like a little digital, little digital translator.
Oh, wow. No.
I'm old.
Well, listen, I mean, I just remember that whole idea of like, for me, I had one of my close family friends growing up, they were Puerto Rican. And I was immersed in like, what's that language you're speaking? And what's that food? Bacalao, what is that? Arroz con pollo, what is that? Like the curiosity of children, I think, is there. I think the adults in the room, to your point, that teacher, they're the ones who tend to screw it up a little bit. Kids have a natural curiosity. I mean, I love learning more about other things, and I think that's a natural place to be. I think the adults in the room.
Well, that's what makes you special. I do, because I still remember being that young girl and my mom cooking, for example, let's say bacalao or platanitos and, all the food that I would eat. And I would be like, Mom, the house smells like Spanish food. My friend's coming over. She can't know that our food doesn't smell like her food. And my mom it was like a dagger to her heart, but you're little and I wanted to be understood and respected. And like coming to my house and smelling my Hispanic food was not cool. Because you were going to maybe go to school and like bully me or, oh, her house smells like Spanish food. Our food has a strong smell. Versus now I look back and I'm like, why did I even care? Her parents were like making pizza and like
okay. Like you should have been like selling mama's plates, honey. But like, how enterprising you are. You should have been like making Stephanie's kitchen.
I wish I could go back so much and speak to that, the young version of me, like the 5-6-year-old that had such a tough time. But I would speak to her, but I don't think I would change anything because it really made me exactly who I am today. Like I said, it really was my superpower. I still try to find that moment that like changed everything for me, where I was like, I'm going to stop hiding it and my life's going to change if I just start embracing it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, you don't want to change your past because you're not guaranteed that your current outcome, which you really love, it would be the same. Yeah. But you do bring up an interesting point. And I've spoken to many different people from different countries, but primarily my friends from Santo Domingo, for example, or Argentina, or different countries that are Latin speaking.
Colombia, none? Colombian? Am I your Colombian friend?
Well, not with this this particular problem, but I do know a lot of Colombians, and in fact, I will just put this out there, and I hope that all my other friends won't kill me. I happen to think that in the novellas, Colombians speak the best Spanish.
Oh, no, it's not just novellas. It's not
just just in general, right? You think in general? Okay, I'm going to get so much hate mail now, but that's just how it is. But they did say to me, though, there were times where they were resentful. As they were growing up as teenagers, as you said, not having the foresight yet to understand the dynamics. They had this love-hate. They were angry almost at their parents at a certain point for they can't be like other American kids. And when they show up, they don't have the proper documentation because of, and it creates a really, I guess, a difficult dynamic. But are you and your parents, were you still close to your parents through that? And how did you get through it?
Corey, let me tell you something that I don't think many people know unless they're my close friend. I actually am so close to my parents that I chose to not have a wedding. I wanted a honeymoon, a month-long honeymoon. There's reasons as to why I didn't want a wedding. I had keep my circle very small, and it was like, if I want to have a wedding, I want it to be something big, and I couldn't come up with a list. Anyway, that side story. I'm so close. I took them on my honeymoon because I wanted thank God they're so close to my husband, but I wanted that memory to be stuck and engraved in me for life. So I wanted to experience it with them. So we traveled abroad, Dubai, did a lot of fun things, and I took them with me. So to answer your question in short, I am beyond close to my parents. They are my best friends. I travel with them all the time. I am exactly who I am. I literally probably yet last night reminded them, like, thank you so much. I'm so happy to who I've become. But yes, to go back to what you're saying, I raised hell at the house. I didn't like the way it smelled. Because of the food. I hated that my mom could never be a chaperone because she didn't speak English. I hated that my dad couldn't come in and say what he does at work because he couldn't speak English. There was so many things that I'd be like, this is the pickup line for the kids that come out of school at 3, and you're in the line that comes at 4 because you can't read the sign. And it was constant. I was just so mad. But I feel like they just did such a great job with me and my sisters and like teaching us and calming us down. And they understood that it was hard. It was hard on us. I had to obviously take English lessons and writing and a lot of things. But they were there through it all, and they pushed us. But thank God for them. They stuck it through. And my mom actually has blonde hair, blue eyes. So everybody thought she was super American. And then it was even worse when they would try to speak to her, and she was like, no hablo inglés. Like,
Yeah. Or I would have thought she was like faking because she doesn't want to like talk to people, right? Blonde.
she never faked. She would always be like, soy colombiana y no hablo inglés.
It's a good defense mechanism. You don't want to be bothered with people. Like, I don't speak English.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's amazing because the irony there is because of the sacrifice and because of their decision, which, is a difficult one for many immigrants to make, to leave a country under those conditions. And then at the end of the day, despite all that, the end result is they raised a highly successful daughter. And so, and your sibling as well, who you said is also doing well. So there's a lot to be said just for good parenting, no matter what the language is. I do want to ask you though, as I mentioned about your humble beginnings. So how did you get interested in real estate, and when did you get your start?
Okay. Love this question. So I went to school for marketing, and ever since I was a little girl, I would always be drawing diamonds and cars. My parents didn't know where it came from. I think it was just in me that I had this like relentless pursuit to find greatness. I went to school. My dad was nibbling here and there on a little bit of development, like one little apartment here and there in like little cities in Fort Lauderdale. And he told me one day, like, I'm losing so much money and having to list the property with a realtor, and then the realtor sell it. So I'm losing a lot of commission. And I said, Dad, why don't I take the test, the real estate test, and I'll list it for you and I'll sell it for you and I'll give you right back all the commission. I want nothing, but I'm going to take the test. And my dad looked at me and he's like, really? You're going to do that for me? And I think the class is a month. And I said, it is a month for the people that want to take a month. But if you know your daughter wants everything now. And there's a class that's a week. So I'm going to take that week class. I'm going to take off everything, no school, no nothing. And I'm going to dedicate to passing the test. Gold Coast offers the 1 week class. I took the class, passed the test. I mean, I had the license within like as fast as you can get it, fingerprints, everything, all was submitted. I got it. I knew nothing. I went and got my license with a company. I remember walking in and I was like, I need to list something. And they're like, you have a listing already? I'm like, it's my dad's and I need to list it right away. And nobody really wanted to help. But I was like, you're either going to help me or I'm going to find someone else that will, or I'm going to Google it, but I'm going to list it. Fast forward, I listed it. I helped my dad. He sold it. And he was so happy. And I knew that I was doing something to help him, which made me happy. And then I was negotiating this deal, it's small deal. And I remember the broker on the other end was a white male with a lot of experience. And he looked at me like, this girl has no idea. She's super young. Her dad's her client. It was like, treated me so poorly, but I loved it. And one of the things that drives me so much is being underestimated. It's just, I love it. I feel like it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I just tried harder. I got the deal done and I was like, this is what I like. So I stuck around with marketing, finished that, and then continued on with real estate.
Yeah, because that's, I think, the basis. I mean, real estate is real estate, and there's lots of people obviously in that world. But dissecting it further, it is the fact that you bring the marketing concepts to it. You bring an awareness of connecting the dots with social media, modern digital marketing concepts to it. So I wonder, with what you've done with the Shoma group,
Mhm.
you sort of brought them forward in that way in a very different space than I guess how they originally worked. So was there any resistance for you sort of like bringing them into like social media and Instagram and all these
My
places?
gosh, I remember first coming into Shoma and I said, there is a white space here. You guys are not marketing the right way. The world is changing. The people that work at Shoma are great. Many of them have been here for 30, 40 years, which is amazing. It's testament of how great the company is. But at the same time, we needed a little bit more diversity. We needed to be able to bring in the new technology. We needed to bring in the younger generation. And there was definitely, I mean, my husband, even the employees that were here, there was a lot of changes. But Stephanie doesn't give up, and I'm very persistent, and I don't take no for an answer. And I adapted little by little, baby steps, baby steps. And yes, for sure, I think it's definitely made a huge impact. I think Shoma has always had a great brand. It's been recognized since the 80s, before I was even born. But now I feel like more people know it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And because also it's so tied to your personal brand too, which is
Yes.
your Instagram, which is so fun and I love it. And, and also, one thing I love that you said is you think it's okay for women to lean into femininity, and it's okay if you happen to show up in like a pink dress with heels on a construction site.
I do.
Yeah,
And
I
I
love it.
love it. So many times I've had people say to me, well, don't let it overshadow who you are, or don't, that just draws too much attention in the meeting. Why don't you just become more subtle? I'm like, I'm not subtle. I come in, make a statement. I know my stuff. I'm very prepared. At a very young age, before I even worked at Shoma, I would never want to walk into a meeting unless I knew all my facts. I would take 4 or 5 hours studying, even if it wasn't necessary and I wasn't going to speak. So why do I have to wear a dark color? Why do I have to have my hair in a bun? Why do I cannot wear my lashes and makeup and glam that I like if I already know my material? The difference in going to a construction site with a pink hard hat versus a black hard hat. What's the difference? That's what I like. And there's no change in the outcome just because of my appearance. The appearance really just doesn't matter.
No, and I love that. That also speaks to stereotype in a way too, right? People will make a perceive an idea about how you show up, and they do that to women all the time, right? And so I think the key element that you said there, which is a great lesson for success, is when you know your stuff. Yeah, you can like pop out of a birthday cake in a
Yes,
bikini, but at the end of the day,
you
let's
know.
talk numbers and data, and you know your stuff. I think that's the difference. I think it's the smoke and mirrors versus people who really show up. And that brings me to another segue. I know you're friends with Kris Jenner, right? And I bring that up because we have mutual friends, she and I too. My friend Alan invented years ago, which changed my life. I was one of their first ambassadors. The Lumi smartphone case would
Yeah,
have this.
like, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it changed. For nightlife people, I was like, oh, I can see myself now. But you know, Kim was the selfie queen, Kim Kardashian, and they were trying to get partnerships with her, and it wasn't working or whatever because she didn't quite at that moment see it. And Kris saw it,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always said from just knowing that experience, Kris is really good at being a great marketing person at all the ventures she does. They're really smartly done. I know you're friends with her, and I know she's given you some advice as well. So give me a little nugget of marketing advice that Kris Jenner has given you.
Kris is just outstanding with branding, and creating a very strong brand, which I think we're very aligned, which is how I feel about Shoma. She is one of the smartest women I have ever met. As a matter of fact, I remember reaching out to her and I said, safely, I love it. We use it at the house. We use it here in the building. I love your product. It's the best cleaning supplies I've ever have used. And your end buyer lives in a lot of our communities. What do you think of the idea of gifting these tenants some of your product? And I think she must have taken like 60 seconds to reply, I love this idea. And she is just such a boss lady. There is all the product appeared in my office like a week and a half later, and I could just feel like she just gets it done. She gets it quick. She's just phenomenal. I feel like we're very aligned in that sense.
You know, I totally agree. I mean, everything I know about her, and it's rubbed off on her daughters, clearly. They really do get it, and they kind of understand sort of how to meet a demand and public interest. And so I think that Chris is quite brilliant too. So I know she has her detractors, but that's, people are always going to talk junk anyway. So, and I know you are also an award winner. You have won the prestigious Women Awards honors for South Florida Business, Business and Wealth, I believe is the organization, and you were like their 2022 one of their award winners. And I know you want to be a role model, or you are a role model for Latin women in the real estate development space. But why do you feel it's critical for more women to work in that space in general?
I think it's critical, Corey, for women to be in every industry. And I think that my existence in this position creates the possibility for the younger generation that's watching. Meaning, when a young girl's on social media, or a young girl turns on the news, or a young girl is in the car with her mom that's listening to this podcast, and you hear of somebody like them that's in this position, it creates the possibility for them to also, oh, it's doable. When you see someone else doing it, it kind of opens the door that, like, hey, I can do it too. So for me, it's extremely important. It's extremely important for me to teach girls to work on their self-confidence. It's something that you have to talk to yourself every day. Your mind is, it's a computer. It's really your supercomputers in there, the way you speak to yourself. It's so important. If I ever see a girl being like, I'm so dumb, or they go like this, I'm like, what do you, that's your hard drive. You just need to speak to yourself in a very nice way, because it starts subconsciously. You start believing the things you say to yourself. So for me, having these girls be able to see that, like, the self-confidence really is a major thing that you need to help yourself, is important for me to be able to teach them.
Wow. Well, words of wisdom, Stephanie Shojaee. Did I say Shojaee? I
Yes,
think I messed up the end.
it's
But
perfect. Perfect.
Shojaee, yeah, okay. I see. I doubted myself. Stephanie Shojaee from the Shoma Group. Thank you so much for being here today with us. We really appreciate your time today here on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you so much, Corey. I can't wait to be back.